Cops of Reddit. What is the worst thing you have discovered? Climbed on top of a rubble pile from a collapsed building in Afghanistan to measure it to calculate the blast size and look for evidence. Got to the top and my leg sunk in with a wet, squishy noise. Pulled my leg out to see that I was practically knee-deep in some dead guy's chest cavity. I am not a cop, but I guess this counts as disturbing. Happened about 5.5 years ago when my father and I were coming back from a fishing trip. A really bad car accident on the interstate. The driver of one vehicle had a broken neck that had a piece of vertebrae protruding out under the skin on his left side, presumably died instantly, and the driver of the other vehicle had a few broken ribs and a broken lower left leg, external compound fracture, so her bone was sticking out from her leg and blood was pooled on the floor mat, but she survived. I was 13 at the time. My dad, who used to be an EMT, rushed out and started helping and left me stranded in the car. My curiosity got the better of me, and I went to go help. Ended up helping wrap the lady's leg in towels and put a makeshift tourniquet on her to stop the bleeding. My dad, myself, and 2 other strangers pretty much saved her life. Felt like it took hours till first responders and state patrol arrived. Showed up to a call once about a baby crying non-stop for hours and no sign of an adult being home. We went into the house and I followed the sound of the crying baby upstairs. Find an 18-month-old with her arms duct taped to her crib. I undid the duct tape and it was obvious this was not the first time it had happened. I brought the child downstairs and outside. The mom was walking up the sidewalk of the housing unit and flipped shit on me. I handed the child off to a patrol and cuffed her. It was the most satisfying clicking of handcuffs I had ever heard. Edit. This happened when I was in the army as an MP. The father of the child was deployed at the time. From what I heard, he was granted permission to return home and take custody of the child. They got a divorce, and I believe he won custody. I don't know what happened to her as far as a sentencing or jail time. Not a cop, but a cop friend of mine in SC Washington, D.C. He got a domestic disturbance call and arrived to a calm scene. The husband explained he and his wife had been arguing, and that she had gone over the top, but they were both fine now. The wife confirmed the story, but stated she didn't want the husband back in the house that night. My friend asked if the husband had a place to go, and he agreed to go to his mother's house for the night. Husband left, then my friend and his partner left soon after. About an hour later, they get a call back to the same house. When they get there, husband is in the kitchen dead. The wife explains that right after the police left, her husband came back and resumed arguing with her. He got in her face, and she stabbed in the neck with a chicken bone, hitting his carotid artery. I just asked my dad, who was a cop for 30+ years. He told me he pulled over a car full of woodchucks, older drunkards from a rural area in the northeast area of the U.S. He was in his late 20s at the time, so in good shape compared to the drunks. I think there were 4. While my dad was processing the driver, he had him in the front seat of his car. Once the guy realized he was probably going to be arrested, he started ripping the radio and anything he could grab out of his car. He grabbed my dad and pulled him out of the passenger side of his vehicle and onto the ground. My dad landed between this guy's legs and into some kind of leg lock chokehold. The guy, during all this, has started to scream to his friends to get his gun and kill him. Once he has him in a leg lock, he looks down and says, "Now I'm gonna kill you," before he starts to choke my dad with his legs. I guess backup showed up just in time, or had been there. The deputy at the time hit him in the head with a baton and sent him out. Dispatched to a double stabbing. 2 victims outside, one adult male with a large wound to his neck and his adult daughter with a wound to her scalp. They were in stable condition, but I could hear screaming and yelling from inside the apartment. They said the suspect, ex-wife's stepmother, is still in the house with other possible victims. I approach the door and it's already been kicked in, and there's a trail of blood leading outside. There's blood on the floor and the walls. Looked like a slasher film. I go in, as it is an active situation, and luckily, an second officer showed up and followed me in pretty quickly. We're inside the apartment and the screaming is so loud we can't hear each other. Two distinct voices, one yelling "Mama" and the other just incoherent screaming. We start checking doors and find one that's locked. I announce myself, but got no response. I then raise my foot to blast the door open. As I do, the family's 18-year-old Down syndrome daughter opens the door and runs at me and grabs me around the waist. Her forehead runs into the muzzle of my pistol. I've never been so close to pulling the trigger, and it would have ruined so many lives. Her mother was in the next room covered in blood, but was apprehended without issue. I really thought I was going to bust the door in to find an active stabbing. That was my rookie year. I'm so thankful I didn't immediately react and took an extra half-second to identify the situation. Opposite side of the coin though, if it was suspect that opened the door, I would have definitely been stuck with the knife before I got a round off. A sheriff I know recalled the story of being a rookie. Had a decomp body at the bottom of a ravine from a car crash. Since he was the rookie, he got the bottom of the bag on the climb back up. This was back in the 70s, so technology of zippers wasn't up to the task at hand. While huffing it up the side of the hill, the juices started swishing back and forth. Some made it out of a gap in the zipper. Said sheriff was in the middle of filling his lungs with cool, crisp air. Large glob of dead guy juice bullseyes directly in his mouth. 40 years later, he can still taste it. Ex-police officer here. This is the call that made me decide law enforcement wasn't for me. Conducted a no-knock search warrant on a drug house. First officer through the door, secures the suspect closest to the door. Second officer secures the person second closest to the door, etc. I was the fourth officer in, and of course my suspect ran. I chase him down a hallway. He runs in a room and slams the door. I burst in right after, jump on top of him and get him secured. Before I cuffed him, he had his hand under the bed. I took him to the living room where the other suspects were being held, go back on the room and look under the bed. Double-barrel sawed-off shotgun. My heart sank. I took a few photos for evidence and collected the gun. Opened the barrels and found it was loaded with 2 slugs. I'm not sure he would have shot me had he gotten a hold of it, but it was enough to keep me up for 2 nights. I resigned 3 weeks later. I was part of a SWAT team, and we got lots of calls that were disturbing, scary, and creepy, but this tops it. My team received a call where shots can been heard inside a house. The caller said that their neighbor's daughter had come to their door covered in blood and shouting had been heard before the shots. We pulled up, grabbed our rifles and put our helmets on. There was a child covered in blood, and 2 people stood holding her. As we headed into the apartment block, we evacuated the floor that the call was made from. Other floors had been actuated already. We made it to the door where the shots were heard from. We knock on the door, shout in. No reply. So we breach. The first sight was blood on the floor. Well, blood everywhere. We walk into the other half of the living room where there is a body on the sofa. Half of us takes the left side and me and a few others take the right. We knock on the bathroom door that was closed. We expected to be shot through the door. No reply again. I slowly open the door, and we get met with more blood and a body in the shower. Blood was found on the child's bed as well. What had happened is the child's mother and father were arguing. The father grabbed his gun and shot the mother in the head. Remember I said the girl had blood over her. It turned out she had been shot in the head as well. Coroners believed it was so she didn't say anything to the police. But the bullet didn't go through the skull. The father had then gone to the bathroom, closed the door, and shot himself in the shower.